Hey, what's going on, guys? It's Leo. So today, I'm not really going to do much of a pre-market analysis. This is going to be more of an overall picture on AMC, and I'm kind of working with a new theory, the lengthening cycle theory. So we've been talking about how there's no denying that this move is very similar to this move, right? You just get that straight rip up, straight rip up. But what's the difference between the two? And well, the difference is that one is taking longer than the other, right? So if we come in here, we can see this run up ran 15 bars. And now this one gets a little tricky because, okay, well, where am I pulling? If I'm pulling from here, well, it took significantly longer for that one to play out. It took 78 bars. If you pull from this low, it took 35 bars, so roughly three times the length of the first one. So if you think about it, it really makes a lot of sense for uh, waves to take longer in time. You have more capital flowing in, which takes longer to flow in, right? It takes, the bigger, heavier the object is to move, it's going to take a little bit longer. Whereas if you just move in a feather. So what I'm thinking is that the premise that it's going to repeat, it's on a 6-month cycle, like some people have been thinking, myself included. I think that's a little bit wrong. I think it's a little bit off. What I think is happening is that the cycle is lengthening. So now the question becomes, if that's true, how long is it lengthening by? So that's what we're going to try to figure out in today's video. So, you know, so first thing that I can do here, right? We just pull up our fib time. What we've been doing is we pulled from here to here. Okay, well, whoops. The 200% the length, that peaked us out there. We can do the same here. Okay, so we got a peak there, right? 200% the length of this first little bump. And then we did the same and so on. So the most recent one would be if we pull from here to here. Okay, well, that would imply that we're about to peak, but it doesn't look like that unless we just get one. I mean, I suppose it's possible, but we're getting here we have a few days before we get to that point where it should be peaking. I mean, it's looking less likely we're going to peak here, right? So where should we be pulling from then? Let me just remove these real quick, clean it up a bit. So if we come in here and we pull from this low to the high, interesting. So we know that the most likely point where we would end in the corrections between the 50 and the 618 in time. So we're ending there. And that would also imply that, assuming we're going to get topped out around the 200% the length of the run up, that would put the peak around January 12th. So that doesn't mean I'm not saying it's going to peak there, but I'm trying to get a window in time as to where we could find the peak. So let's see if there's anything else that we can find here. I think that I had pulled here as another reference point. Okay, so now I'm going to pull up the Elliott wave count we've been working with. Give me 1 second here. Is that everything? Okay, I'm going to clean this up a bit. Hang on. Just trying to clean this up. So we don't really need all those waves on there. Okay, there we go. So I've been operating under the assumption that this is a WXY correction, right? So this would be the end of the W, you get your X, Y. So if we're thinking with our Elliott wave caps on, I would want to pull the fib time from the end of the W to the peak of the X, right? To try to figure out where the next peak would be, which would imply that it would be here, right? Which is very close to that 12th mark. So that puts us to the 3rd of January for the peak, right? So that doesn't necessarily mean that we're going to have, we're going to just continue chopping sideways. I mean, I expect us to start climbing higher and then we get the big rip. But it's looking more like this is going to peak out closer to the end of the year than previously had thought. And I mean, it makes a lot of sense. So come down here, look, if we measure from the point where the prior correction had ended, measuring to the peak, well, that took 78 days, right? So if we're under the assumption that these cycles are lengthening, we're at the 78-day mark, or at least very close to it. So it makes a lot of sense that we would peak a little bit beyond that, right? So, I mean, if we come up here, we can, just to illustrate that I think these cycles are lengthening, if we measure from the peak at 77.30, measure it down to where that correction ended, okay, well, that took 45 days. So we can do the same to the prior peak back in January to the very low. And that only took 9 days, or so 9 trading days, that is. So obviously, these cycles are lengthening in time. We don't know exactly. I haven't seen an exact pattern to say that, okay, it's lengthening by 1.5 times, So it's really just sort of a guessing game. And this is why I kind of say that, trying to gauge the timing markets is extremely difficult to do. But this is kind of giving us a window, So I would say best case scenario, we wake up one morning, we get a rip, and we just gap up, and we're peaking out here towards the end of November. But it's looking more like it'd be more end of December, beginning of January, where it would actually peak. So those are my thoughts this morning on lengthening cycle theory. If y'all have any questions, drop them in the comments below. Again, I'm not an expert in doing time analysis. My expertise is more analyzing markets and looking at financials and stuff like that, like traditional technical analysis, not so much gauging when a market will peak. In my opinion, that's one of the most difficult things to do in trading is timing markets. So, but people do seem to be interested in this. I think it gives them some comfort in knowing, okay, well, this is roughly the time frame I could be expecting the potential squeeze to happen. So hopefully that gives y'all an idea, and like, subscribe, share, all that good stuff. And I'll talk to y'all soon. Bye.